This is a live press conference. You'll first be hearing from 6 board members who will explain why we're all here. That will take about 8 minutes. After that, I will moderate questions from the press. With that, I would like to introduce Shoshana Zuboff, author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism and Professor Emerita, Harvard Business School. Shoshana?
Thank you, Kyle. You know, folks, last night, Mr. Trump shamelessly weaponized broadcast television and the venerable institution of the presidential debate to sow fear and confusion, setting the stage for his rejection of the electoral process and of the peaceful transfer of power. Our group has come together for one purpose. We demand comprehensive action to ensure that Facebook cannot be weaponized to undermine the vote and with it American democracy. Ours is an emergency intervention aimed at Mr. Zuckerberg and Facebook employees. We now approach the 59th minute of the 11th hour in this democratic crisis, and the time for excuses and political deals is over. Facebook, America and the world look to you now for decisive action to protect democracy. History is watching. Now, I am honored today to be able to introduce our esteemed, 5 of our esteemed board members who will each make their own brief statement. I'll be thanking each one and then passing the baton to the next as we move forward in the next few minutes. First, I'd like to introduce Rashad Robinson, who is president of Color of Change. Rashad.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you to my fellow board members. Color of Change was founded almost 15 years ago in the aftermath of a flood, which was caused by bad decision makers that turned into a life-altering disaster by bad decision makers. It was Hurricane Katrina, and Black folks were literally on their roofs begging for the government to do something, and we were left to die. Katrina illustrated a lot of things that people already knew: geographic segregation, generational poverty, the impacts of what we've done to our planet. But at the heart of it, no one was nervous about disappointing community, about disappointing Black people. You know, in that moment, we formed a new infrastructure. Our founders formed a new infrastructure, leveraging technology and the new tools to channel our hopes and aspirations into demands to hold government and corporations accountable. And for the last 15 years, we've been doing it. And for the last several years, civil rights groups like Color of Change have been demanding that Facebook be accountable for its role in our democracy and our economy, urging Facebook to take aggressive action to tackle the threats to our democracy that continue to fester on its platform. Threats that include calls to violence by white supremacist militia and that have resulted in the killing of protesters and attacks and harassment on our community. Facebook must stop immediately all of the dangerous misinformation that is attacking our elections and promoting voter suppression. In June, the Stop Hate for Profit Coalition, led by a set of organizations, got more than 1,000 companies to participate in an unprecedented month-long advertising boycott. You'll hear from my colleagues at ADL and the NAACP, but also Free Press was part of the leadership of that effort. We brought thousands of new voices into our movement to join our call for Facebook to stop putting profits over the people who need safety and integrity on their platform. The incentive structure at Facebook is broken. At every single turn, profit and growth sits above safety, integrity, and security. Just yesterday, 2 hours before the debate started, where the President of the United States signaled for white nationalist groups, called on for white nationalist groups to mobilize around this upcoming election, to mobilize in support of him. 2 hours before that debate, leaders at Facebook responded to an email from me asking them to deal with Donald Trump Jr.'s calls on the Facebook platform for an army of Trump supporters to show up at the polls to protect the elections, calls that we have heard in Black communities for years as a threat to our ability to express our will for a better future. The folks at Facebook sent me an email quibbling about the words enlist, the words army, trying to parse what could have really meant, and in turn told us that it actually didn't violate. Our blood will have to be shed before Facebook does anything unless policymakers and all of those who enable Facebook step up and do something. History will not only look unkindly on Facebook, but it will look unkindly on all of those who knew better and did not do better. This is our opportunity to set a new course for how social media platforms will engage in the future. And that's why I'm proud to be part of this coalition and stand with these incredible leaders and the organizations they represent.
Thank you, Rashad. I'm going to pass the baton to Shireen Mitchell, founder of Digital Sisters. And we're all going to try to keep our remarks to somewhere around a minute so we can push through to the talking to the press at the other end. Thanks so much. Shireen, take the floor, please.
Yes, thank you. I founded the first organization to get women and girls of color online and into tech, and then followed up and founded the organization called Stop Online Violence Against Women that was specifically focused on how online harassment and violence were impacting women of color, particularly Black women on these platforms. As we tracked this behavior for years, since as early as 2013, we saw how Facebook in particular, but other platforms basically made it okay to target Black women and their voices. Fast forward to the election, we were the first to come out with a report that showed that Russia, the IRA troll farm, focused specifically and intensely on African-American voters and Black identity. We were able to track this because we saw this type of behavior that was happening on these platforms on a regular basis. We were able to look at ways to help women who were being impacted and harmed by these platforms, with the platforms not doing anything about it. So when we talk about digital vote suppression, we're talking about the ways in which our votes are targeted using these platforms, using technology, and sharing false information and disinformation to impact the election. This has changed, but what has not changed is targeting Black voters in particular. And now we're watching and seeing how domestic and foreign actors are targeting us and targeting the vote, particularly the vote of Black voters. So what we're joining this oversight board today as with these other fantastic leaders, because we need something to be done about it, and the safety and integrity of the election, and also the safety and integrity of voters, particularly Black women who are the base of the party.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Now let me turn the floor over to Derek Johnson, CEO of the NAACP. Derek? Is Derek missing at the moment?
No, I was on mute. Here I go.
Oh,
Yes.
Derek, there you are. So good
Yes.
to see you. Made my heart skip a
Yes,
beat.
That's right. So thank you
Please
for the
take the floor.
opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity, and I am proud to serve on this board with many who are concerned with the platform of Facebook. NAACP, 111 years old, this nation's largest civil rights organization and oldest. We've seen many iterations of voter suppression. We've seen many iterations of violence as a result of Americans seeking to exercise their right to vote. From our founding, which was founded around the issues of lynching, to push back to have anti-lynching legislation. We have not seen this level of deafness from a corporate entity to serve society. We have had many conversations with Facebook, and they have refused to address basic issues of keeping people safe and protecting our democracy. In this moment, in the aftermath of last night's debate, where the president of this nation made a direct appeal to a white supremacist group, while at the exact same time refusing to denounce white supremacy, is problematic. I can only imagine the activity that's taking place on social media platforms like Facebook today as a result. So we must stand up as a community to continue to call on Facebook to be a good corporate citizen, to put guardrails in place, to keep people safe, protect our democracy, because the resultant violence that we have seen in Kenosha, what we've seen in the Bay Area with the federal law enforcement officer being killed as a result of inaction of Facebook, we fear that those activities will carry out the next 34 days up through the elections and after the elections. So this oversight board is also important because Facebook has refused to protect people and protect our democracy.
Thank you so much, Derek. I'm now turning the floor over to Professor Lawrence Tribe, scholar of constitutional law and a professor at the Harvard Law School. Larry?
Thank you, Shoshana. I'm honored to be part of this effort, probably the most important effort in my 50-year career in the law. We are, as Shoshana said at the outset, watching a coup d'etat in progress. The president spews hatred, sows chaos, spreads lies, spawns conspiracies, and actively suppresses the casting and counting of opposing votes. Then Fox loyally echoes and magnifies Trump's filth. Then Facebook micro-targets that filth to tens of millions of eligible voters and gets richer by the minute while it does it. People like me can engage, as I am engaging 24/7, in litigation to plan various legal strategies that will get in the way of the president's effort to steal the election. But that will not be enough. Unless the Goebbels-like cycle that I've described is broken, and broken now, we could be witnessing the end of the great American experiment. Nothing could be more important than to break that cycle. Law alone is not enough. This is a matter of society and information and culture. It's a matter of business models. We need to act, and we need to act together, which is why I am so proud and pleased to be part of the board that Carol Cadwalder has put together and that Shoshana is introducing you to.
Thank you so much, Larry. And now finally, let me give the baton to Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, and will convey to you our initial ask in order to achieve some of the goals that we've just laid out. Jonathan?
Thank you, Shoshana, and thanks to everyone here today. At ADL, we've been tracking extremist movements for generations. We've seen all kinds of hateful groups over the decades, but we've never quite seen a moment like this. Not just when tensions seem to be at an all-time high, but when a single media platform actively and knowingly has facilitated the flow of poison into the population and enabled waves of anti-Semitism and racism, Holocaust denialism and Islamophobic conspiracies, disinformation and extremism. Never have we seen one source allow such toxins to spread so far and so fast with such devastating results. And that platform is Facebook. The list is long, from Christchurch to Pittsburgh, from India to Myanmar, from England and to America. Again and again, Facebook has been weaponized with horrifying results. And in our country today, this crisis is more acute than ever as we face perhaps the most pivotal presidential election of our lifetimes, perhaps in the history of our country. That's why ADL, NAACP, Color of Change, Free Press, and so many other groups came together to form the Stop Hate for Profit Coalition this summer. That's why I joined the Real Facebook Oversight Board. And that's why here today, I am saying, we are saying, that Facebook finally must take concrete action to protect the democratic process and mitigate the risk of violence, the very real risk of violence in the weeks and months ahead. And so we, the Real Facebook Oversight Board, urge Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook to take 3 specific steps, 3 meaningful measures to protect this election and preserve our democracy. It is the least they can do. Number 1, Facebook must enforce its own policies, actually remove posts inciting violence, whether those come from ordinary citizens, public figures, or elected officials, including the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Number two, Facebook must ban all paid advertising that mentions presidential election results until one candidate clearly and empirically is declared president-elect and the other candidate on the record concedes. Third and finally, Facebook must label all organic posts about presidential election results as untrue and premature until one candidate is declared president-elect and the other candidate concedes. This is what we ask.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And now we're going to revert back to Kyle. And Kyle Taylor will be taking questions from the press and allow our discussion to bloom from here and these brilliant, trenchant comments. So honored to be part of this group. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and thank you, Shoshana, for managing that section. You did a brilliant job. Before we move to press questions, I wanted to pass briefly to Carol Cadwalader, who wanted to say a quick word. Carol?
Hi, thanks so much, Carl. Thank you so much, everybody. That was so clearly put. All I'm going to do is say that there are really amazing experts, academics, civil rights advocates on this call. And I really hope that that some of their expertise might come out in the course of it. So there's too many here to kind of name quickly, but I mean, I'm just looking at my screen, and there's Maria Ressa, who's in the Philippines, who's already been a victim of Facebook's harms. She's facing 6 years in prison as a result of Facebook's influence operations and what's happened in her country. She sounds that warning. There is, I'm just looking around, there's Sophia Noble, who's a leading academic in in algorithmic oppression and the way that it affects Black and minorities disproportionately. And I just want you to get to the question. So that's all I'm going to say is that the idea of this is it's a brain's trust and it will grow. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. All right, now just as a quick reminder to the press, please keep your chat function open so a producer can tell you when your question's up. When your name's called, remember to turn on your microphone and direct your question to a board member. With that, we will start with Mary Plum of NBC Nightly News. Mary? All right, Mary, I can come back to you. I'm just going to go ahead and go to Julia Borston and Stephen Desaulnier from CNBC. Okay. I'll move next to Carolyn Sands and Fergal Gallagher from ABC News.
Hi, Fergal here. I guess my question would be to Jonathan, and basically on that first step about enforcing Facebook's policies to stop inciting violence. I mean, what specifically they have so many rules, but what specifically could they do more to enforce that they're not doing now? Is it being more specific on the language, or maybe you can clarify?
I mean, Fergal, yes, indeed, they do have terms of service. But what use are terms of service if they don't serve any purpose? So Rashad Robinson talked earlier in this press conference about asking them to step in and stop allowing people like Donald Trump Jr. to call for the militarization of the polling places. That is a violation of their terms of service, and yet they keep it up, you know, and they can give you all kinds of convoluted explanations. You know, we've seen Facebook groups literally utilized this summer to organize violent actions on the streets and undermine the Black Lives Matter protests. In fact, the Kenosha Guards, another militia group, literally planned in broad daylight on Facebook groups the action that led to Kyle Rittenhouse showing up fully armed with a semi-automatic weapon and murdering 2 people in broad daylight. Fergal, any other company, any other media business would have shut this down long ago. The fact that Facebook doesn't enforce their own terms of service, at best, it's inexplicable. At worst, it could be illegal. And I think that's why Professor Tribe and others have brought cases. And that's why this group is going to be focused on holding Facebook accountable now until Election Day and beyond.
So like that specific example, the Kenosha Guard, where they said it was contractors who missed it, so their core team didn't find it. So their core team should be looking at it, everything, right?
J&J didn't get to say, well, those Tylenol bottles were tampered with, but maybe contract workers had shipped them, right? Ford didn't get to say, well, the Pinto was blowing up, but maybe contract workers put it on the line. Facebook should do what every other company in American business history does. When your product doesn't work and it kills people, you take it down and you fix it, or you sunset it. That's how it works in every other industry. That's what we're asking for here.
Many of us have run campaigns about the fact that they are using contract workers when they actually should be using employees, not paying people a living wage, not giving them the type of protections that they need for having to deal with some of the hateful content, which causes all sorts of emotional and psychological damage. The fact of the matter is, when COVID hit, these folks were sort of sent home and sent away and did not have access to be able to even have healthcare and other things that employees. This is a company that's making a whole lot of money and is now using contractors for things that they say they care about and take seriously, which is only an example of why they don't take it seriously in the first place.
And also make sure that we understand that they said the same exact thing when genocide happened in Myanmar. If that's the same excuse from then to now, what have they done differently? And the other piece about this is that people don't realize is that when you have contractors and those that don't live in this country, don't understand what white supremacy looks like and the violence that happens in this country, they will all miss the mark on it. If you don't have people who have understanding of what it looks like for Black identity and to be targeted on this land, that's one of the reasons why they need to change their not only their service, but the ways in which they're hiring employees and contractors to do the moderation process.
The problem with Facebook is they are refusing to take responsibility or be accountable for their platform. They tout their successes, but try to blame their failures on outside forces or factors, when in fact, they are both accountable and responsible for how the platform is being used. So to say in one breath that you have community standards in place, and when those community standards are not followed or you fail to enforce them, then you blame it on an outside factor. That's irresponsible for a corporation of this size, and there needs to be more accountability taken by them. There needs to be more accountability put in place so future harms are not caused by the use of this platform.
All right, thanks very much, Derek. Let's move to the next question. Next we have Rob Pegararo from USA Today. Rob? Rob, you're on mute. All right, I'm gonna give it one more moment, Rob. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. Next week, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Hey guys, so it looks like I've seen many other demands placed upon Facebook, made of Facebook in the past, like stop allowing micro-targeting political ads, much more sweeping changes. These seem very focused. I take it you're looking at what you realistically think they will do, regardless of whether they actually will bring that sort of level of goodwill to it, but simply what you think is a realistic ask of them in the 30-odd days we got left.
Look, apologies are not enough, Rob. We need action. And we don't need action in some abstract way. We have concrete, specific steps they can take to protect this election and preserve our democracy. We just don't have time to hear what was Mark's phrase, Rashad, an operational mistake? around the Kenosha Guard. That was a deliberate decision, the product of a series of decisions. And now Facebook has an opportunity to make a deliberate decision here today to protect our democracy. It's that simple.
You know, we've learned that if we're not really specific with Facebook, they will claim that they are already doing what we're asking them to do. So we've had to get very specific in a very short time frame. Clearly, there is much more that Facebook needs to do to protect the health and safety of people and our democracy. But in the next 45 days, we think they need to be focusing in this way. The Kenosha Guard page is just another example of how Facebook is not enforcing its own policies. It has a policy against calls to arms on its events pages. It did not enforce, despite the fact that all the warning signs were there. And we have to think now about what this means for the safety of American voters as we go to the polls. And that's why we need to focus in this way moving into election period.
All right.
I would only,
go ahead.
can I just add a quick footnote to these important comments, Kyle?
Yes, go ahead.
Our asks right now are in emergency mode and will continue to be. But make no mistake, as the situation evolves, if we need to, we will be issuing more demands that follow the trouble as it evolves. So this is a beginning, but not necessarily the end.
All right, thanks, Shoshana. We'll move to the next question from Stephen Levy of Wired.
Hi, thanks, folks. So actually, Rob asked a similar question to mine, so I'll ask a different question. Facebook seems to regard this board as a collection of chronic critics of Facebook, and I'm wondering whether their perception of it is basically, they wouldn't have to answer to one of you speaking in a book like Shoshana wrote, or with a publication backing you, or with Maria, there's the force of her stature, but something that could easily be dismissed. So I'm curious why you feel that these demands are going to move a person like Mark Zuckerberg, who I can tell you is a very dug in and stubborn person, and maybe less likely to respond to a band of people he sees as foes, rather than quarters he has to answer to.
The problem with Mark Zuckerberg, the platform, they see themselves above any accountability. Many of us have had multiple conversations with him and/or his executives. There have been many demands made, requests made, conversations had from in his home on Zoom, and they've done nothing. This is not about being chronic critics. This is about making sure people are safe and our democracy is protected. We should not allow him, nor should we distract from the central theme here. We know this platform has been used to promote white supremacy. White supremacist groups convene on this platform, they recruit on this platform, and they've used this platform to create avenues of harm towards people based on their race, their religious belief, their ethnic background. That should not be tolerated. This is not about critics. This is about keeping people safe and keeping our democracy safe.
And the thing I'll add is that Facebook has done something cute, right? They have created their own oversight board, Supreme Court, shall I say. And those people, when the coronavirus hit and we saw so much disinformation, and I reached out to have a conversation with Sheryl Sandberg about what their internal board was doing about it, she told me they didn't have computers yet. And so that they weren't sort of set up to operate. The fact of the matter is there are multiple audiences here. Yes, there's the audience of Mark Zuckerberg, but we live in a society where there should not be a single person that gets to make all of the rules for a corporation this size and this scope. There should also be the role that government and oversight and regulation and other rules play here as well. And so part of this is also, as Facebook rolls out its PR vehicle to try to say that there is oversight and accountability on a piece of infrastructure where I have actually went to go speak multiple times to their shareholders meetings, where he has 60% of the shares, where he is chairperson and CEO, that we also need to continue to send the message that new rules of the road are needed, and that even while they put in PR vehicles to say that there's accountability, those PR vehicles are weak and insufficient.
Damien, did you want to say a quick word before I move to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite amused by that dismissal of this group, because it sort of implies that the actual Facebook Oversight Board is a group of people that are well disposed towards the company, are favorable. There should be Facebook critics on that board as well, if it meant anything, if it had any teeth, but it's a company that doesn't really want or accept criticism internally or externally. And the fact that we've come together with people from different countries around the world, different legal systems, different interests, but are all encountering similar problems, shows that this is a problem that affects the way Facebook works around the world. It's not about one election and one place. And that the decisions about what happens on Facebook, given it's so central to so many people's lives, shouldn't just be down to Mark Zuckerberg. They should be down to external criticism, external challenge, and I believe ultimately external oversight as well.
I
Thank
say
you,
a
Damien.
word
All
about,
right, we're going to move to the.
say a word about that.
I'm sorry, we're just going to move to the next question, but the next question is from Queenie Wong from CNET.
Hi, I had a question about the oversight board that Facebook is forming. I mean, how do you think, what do you think should happen with that? Do you think that board should not move forward? They haven't had their first case yet. So what do you think should happen with that particular oversight board? And was calling yourself the real Facebook oversight board part of some strategy to challenge the other oversight board?
I
I'd be
suppose
happy
maybe I
to
should.
tackle that, or
Should-
who wants to go
I
for it?
tell you what, if I just say just something quickly, and then Shoshana,
Yeah.
perhaps you can take it on. And the thing is that there are like really impressive experts and academics on the Facebook's oversight board that it's created, and we wish them all the luck in the world, and we cheer them onwards, and we really hope that they can do something in the longer term to hold Facebook to account. But they are not going to be holding them to account right now at this critical time. And so that was the whole purpose of doing this, was that it is meant as just an emergency response in this moment, given the risks that these people have been shouting about and are not being heard. And the only thing we wanted to do, and there's a little band of people who've been working behind the scenes to just try and put this on and to give these experts and these leaders a voice, is that it's just to try and make people understand that the people who really understand these systems and who really understand this technology and understand the ways that it impacts these communities are sounding the alarm bell and are saying that this really could be used to destroy, American democracy as you know it, essentially. But I'm going to hand it to Shoshana, because she's been a cheerleader of this project from the start, and her support in terms of getting it off the ground has been very key.
Thank you, Carol. I just want to add a couple little ideas. Number one, I agree with Carol that there are fine people on that board, and nothing that we're doing is personally aimed at them. I believe it is fundamentally illegitimate for Facebook as a corporation to be constructing and funding its own oversight board. And that can only happen in a world where we have a void in the rule of law, that we do not yet have the legal frameworks and institutions in place that should provide the oversight that this highly consequential corporation requires. The second point I want to introduce, and this also reverts to Stephen's question, I think we all regard this board as not a vehicle for our own voices so much as a channel for the voices of the American public, of the American citizenry. We are at a moment right now where, based on the most up-to-date survey research, the American public has entirely lost faith with this corporation. I'm looking at numbers right now. 70% say Mark Zuckerberg has too much power and that Facebook puts profits over societal harm. 79% want Facebook to do more to protect democracy. 91% want it to fix misinformation as a matter of the greatest urgency to democracy. So if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to listen to Maria Ressa or Larry Tribe or Shoshana Zuboff or any of the other great people who have put their time into this, listen to the American public, because they are telling you, Mr. Zuckerberg, that your time is up one way or another. You can get on the right side of this, or you can continue to prevaricate and hide behind your political deals. That's where we are.
Thanks, Shoshana. I wanted to bring Maria in quickly, and then we'll move to the next question. Maria? I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. We got you now. Your audio is on.
I want to say that I think, part of the reason we came together, and Stephen, I think this answers your question, is that I understand Facebook's role. We all do. We also understand its immense power. Rappler remains a partner, but part of coming together, what I've learned in this process is that our problem is not our problem alone. Our problem is everyone's problem. And, for the last 4 years, I've been jumping up and down saying our dystopian present is now your dystopian present. So it's, I guess, to jump off what Shoshana said is, these actions are very doable for Facebook. We want Facebook to take these actions to protect democracy, not just in America, but hello, the global South suffers far more. But when it comes to you in the way it is coming now, we will bear the brunt of that as well. So hopefully it works, right? That's why we're together.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, the next question is from Vice, David Gilbert at Vice. David?
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to chat to us. I'm just going to pick up on something Shoshana and Maria said there, that, Shoshana, you were saying that the American public is no longer behind Facebook. And, those stats you say are fine, but in terms of what will really get Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook board to listen is probably, a loss of revenue and loss of numbers of people using the service. And despite, 4 or 5 years now of almost constant daily problems and criticism and controversy about Facebook coming up, nothing really has changed. Like if the fact that the UN said that Facebook facilitated genocide in Myanmar wasn't enough to make any real changes to the company, obviously for a lot of people on this call, the US election is a huge deal. And for people in America where Facebook is, it's kind of bringing it to the fore. But for a lot of people around the world, these problems have been there for years and no one has paid any attention. I suppose my question is, do you guys think that you need to get the public on board for this campaign? That Facebook has been listening to you guys for years, giving out and criticizing. It's been listening to journalists like me criticizing it and, reporting on its problems, but nothing has really changed. Do you think that in order to really make a difference, and I guess we saw a little bit of that earlier this year with the advertising boycott, but again, that made a tiny dent in its profits. Do you think you need to get the public and a kind of a wave of public support for this campaign to really make Facebook sit up and listen and actually make the changes that you're demanding?
All right, can we go to Roger first on that? Roger?
Yeah, David, fantastic question. I think the context we should be looking at here is that Facebook has been allowed, all internet platforms have been allowed to make their own rules and they've been allowed to ignore legitimate requests for better ways of doing things. The context of this year with the global pandemic, the massive amounts of disinformation that have resulted in the United States having more than 200,000 fatalities, at least 150,000 of which were unnecessary and made worse by disinformation spread over Facebook. The George Floyd murder and all of the white supremacy that Facebook enabled around that is changing attitudes in the United States really dramatically and really quickly. So I think that the frame of the last 5 years is a frame, but I think as we look forward, we have to imagine that with all the issues in the economy, all the issues with the pandemic, that at least in the United States, there's a greater awareness that allowing people like Mark Zuckerberg to be entirely in charge of their own future, which winds up being the future of all of us, is not going to work. And so I would simply say to you that this is a step in a very, very long process. And that what we are trying to do is to bring a collective voice to say to Mark Zuckerberg, Mark, you're really running out of time here. If you do not make actions we're talking about here, this is not something that he should view as optional. We're talking about the fate of democracy in the largest democracy in the world, in the largest economy in the world. If through his either action or inaction, he allows American democracy to be destroyed, the whole world's going to be much worse off. And this is, in a sense, the last chance for him to get this right.
Thank you, Roger. I'm going to ask the next head to the next question. It is from Carrie Paul at The Guardian. Carrie?
Hi, this is Carrie. I just wanted to ask, watching the debates last night, if any of your demands kind of became more urgent or if it sort of solidified what you've already been asking, or as well if there are any new demands you would like to highlight.
Safia, do you want to go? Great.
I think there's no question that the mass media channel for helping educate the American public was also broken last night. And so what we know is that people will turn to the places that they have available to them to get news and information. And one of the things we're most concerned about is that Facebook has an unprecedented amount of control over the kind of news that, quite frankly, Americans need to be informed to have a robust democracy. So there's no question that if mass media, television, and otherwise is not able to help communicate out on the important issues, then the role of Facebook will have even more disproportionate harm. I think we're incredibly alarmed at the speed and scale through which propaganda, just last night, we saw that the top trending sites that were communicating about the debate, what was happening off platform, were in fact white supremacist and extremely far-right leaning organizations that were weaponizing Facebook to take control of the narrative about the debates. So there's a relationship here between mass media and what Facebook is doing. And quite frankly, they are so reckless in their lack of regard for understanding how almost instantly their platform can be weaponized to foment white nationalism, white supremacy, to undermine and suppress the vote across a variety of different constituents, young people, African Americans and Latinos. We're seeing this in real time, those of us who study this work, and I think it's absolutely crucial that if Facebook will not on its own, then we might need some major intervention by regulators immediately because too much is on the line.
Thanks, Safi. I just want to bring in Larry quickly on this. Larry?
I think the importance of public intervention should be stressed. Shoshana mentioned that we don't now have a legal framework that can impose the kind of accountability that we're calling for. There was an echo between what we heard on the debate and the lack of accountability of Zuckerberg, because you will all remember, I'm sure, that when the President of the United States was asked, not during the debate, but a few weeks ago, do you have any accountability, any sense of responsibility for all the people who have died? He said quite openly, I'm not accountable. we have to have methods of holding power to account. That's why, in the long run, a company as large and as powerful as Facebook needs to be confronted with the possibility of being regulated and broken up. It waves the flag of free speech, but instead spews false speech and violence and encourages violence. The idea of holding it accountable with simple lawsuits for liability, the way we did the tobacco industry, is not going to be enough. We need a different legal framework, and the purpose of this effort is not simply to talk to Mark Zuckerberg, but to help to build a long-run movement of popular support for a different political and legal regime. When some of you mentioned that there are 39 days till the election, we have to think in longer terms. There's 112 days until the inauguration. We are in danger until that point and well beyond. So this is a call to action that doesn't expire simply with November 3rd, and that isn't addressed only to Mr. Zuckerberg. It has to generate a global call for responsibility, to which even Facebook will have to respond.
And on that point, if I can just ask, Linya Banyo wants to add to that before we move to the next question.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I think it's important to draw the, the connection between what's happening in the United States and what's happening in Africa. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and it's important to see and learn the lessons from which we have had from the 2007 elections, where Kenya went into post-election violence, and the case, landed at the International Criminal Court. It's also important to look at the work that Facebook has done in Africa and follow that up with Cambridge Analytica and the impact that they have had in Africa. And so I think drawing that parallel will be important for the United States to learn lessons from it, especially on the impact of social media, which specifically in this case is Facebook. Facebook has a content moderation center in Kenya, which is serving the entire African continent. And I believe that fixing this in the United States will also fix democracy across the African continent and even largely in the global south. Facebook will be here for part of the elections in Africa and then profit from the elections and then leave after the elections. I think Facebook should be held accountable. The world will be better for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, let's go to the next question. It's from Shirin Gaffrey at Vox. It might be Gaffrey, I apologize, Shirin.
Hi, yes, it's Shireen Ghaffari at Vox, and my question is, what is the Real Oversight Board's next order of business? What are, besides sort of media and public statements, what does the Oversight Board really plan to do next?
Shoshana, do you want to?
Well, we are set up to continuously monitor. We are going to be, as I said before, evolving new demands, new forms of communication. And I think what Larry said before is extremely important. This right now is emergency action. We are designed as an emergency intervention, and part of that is, yes, to make a lot of noise and to create a channel where the attitudes of right now the American public find a way to be expressed, find a way to get attention, because Americans are trapped between a platform on which they depend in many ways and a platform that they know is undermining their lives and their government. So in the short term, we're focused on these demands, but then we have the larger challenge of creating the new forms of collective action so we can actually provide channels for voice for many people. And that really is the work of the coming months and years once we get this election behind us.
Thank you very much, Shoshana. All right, I'll keep us moving on to the next question. Lawrence Dodds from The Telegraph.
Hi all, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, great. I wanted to ask you about the role of Facebook's algorithms in this, and particularly the group recommendation algorithms. This question is to anybody who sort of cares to answer it and feels equipped to answer it. But I know that Roger McNamee, you and I have talked before about sort of the algorithms being at the root of this problem. And if you're trying to fix the problems that the algorithms cause and the sort of clean up the content that they tend to recommend, you're kind of acting downstream of the problem. There was another coalition of Facebook critics, I think including the Mozilla Foundation, Accountable Tech, Center for Humane Tech, those kind of folks, who have called for Facebook to just shut off its group recommendations feature entirely until they figure out how to fix it properly. I wonder, do you back that as a group? Do you back that request? And beyond that, are there any requests that you would have to do with Facebook's algorithms and to do with the content that it recommends, right? And if that's not part of your emergency demands, why not? Thank you.
Safia, did you want to come in first on that?
Definitely.
There's no question that the algorithms that Facebook, like other big tech companies, are using are incredibly complex. In fact, so complex that most of those companies don't even know how they work. We know this. So we have to ask ourselves, would we allow, for example, pharmaceutical companies to roll out drugs to the public? And if they kill some people or if there's some harm, well, it's just chemistry. I think we have to think about the way in which big tech talks about their products and their algorithms like they're just math or it's just complex code that the public can't understand, when their own engineers, in fact, can't understand. So the question is, should this product, in fact, as Professor Tribe said, should it indeed even exist? Is it legitimate for a product like this to exist when it is so recklessly endangering millions of people around the world? And I think these are the key questions that really underlie the question about Facebook's algorithmic logics.
Thank you very much, Safia. I just wanted to, I know Shireen wants to jump in quickly on this as well.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for this. And this is not just about people's lives. Like, we're talking about our democracy at all. We focus on our project to stop digital vote suppression because the way in which the algorithms also participate in getting people not to go vote and impacting the decisions that they make. The problem that we have is that it's not just the algorithms, it's the assumption that this disinformation doesn't impact human lives for people to take action. And we've seen that there is no difference between their actions online and their actions offline. So it's not just about the algorithms, it's also about the impact that this has on our day-to-day. And when we looked at this in 2016, we saw that there was an impact. In the United States, their elections was impacted in Michigan when 90K people didn't vote top of the ticket. And that was a Russian campaign. And so we need to understand not only the campaigns that are using these algorithms, but the impact on the lives and those who are being targeted. And I think Maria said this really well about the micro targeting that makes this more insidious, because that type of micro targeting, where you can go down to what we saw, what was recently reported, you can go all the way down to a section in Wisconsin and target a community and target an actual voter, then we fundamentally don't understand not only the impact of the algorithms, but the impact on elections and impact on our lives overall.
Thanks, Shireen. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next question from Rishi from CNN Business.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for calling on me. My question is, does this board see any scope to collaborate with and influence Facebook's oversight board, not Facebook itself, but some sort of direct link with Facebook's oversight board going forward?
Shall I come in just very briefly? I mean, I think it would be brilliant. I think, wouldn't that be amazing if Facebook's own oversight board joined these experts here in their calls for action? I mean, I think that would be really impactful. I know that certain people on this board have been doing personal reaching out to those who are on it. That's going on behind the scenes at the moment, but maybe there is something that could come of that in the coming weeks to strengthen the demands and pressure on Facebook. And that's all that this is about, is increasing the pressure on Facebook to act.
Thanks, Carol. I'll go to the next question from, is it Lise Dunton from The Sun? Apologies again if that's
Yes.
mispronounced.
It's Lisi, thank you, from the New Sun.
Lisi. Okay.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's fascinating and just so important. Thank you. I'm realizing the question is actually focused on your oversight efforts a bit more after the election, but and it's by reporter John Simons, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. He asks, he wonders what might be the next steps to make the following two things possibly happen. One, educate middle school students through high school on the laws of liability and the limits of the constitutional protection of both free speech and freedom of the press. That's one thing. Second thing, somehow bring together the House and Senate to pass legislation naming the internet as a source of public media. Then, just as all government agencies end in .gov, all legitimately recognized media outlets could end in .com, possibly with a fact-based sidebar. Unproven sites engaged in promoting conspiracy content, perhaps with a fact-based sidebar. And then .dating for dating sites, .music, and so on. This is just a thought, maybe just food for thought, but perhaps there are viable solutions to think about. Do you think there's any steps that could happen later on? That's my question.
I mean, just to be fair, we haven't discussed those, specific hypotheticals. I do think part of the function of this board is not only to make a call, a moral call, to Mark Zuckerberg to be on the right side of history, but to actually fight disinformation with more public awareness about what is happening. And so, yes, we are relying on news sources and reporters to educate the public about how Facebook is being used to manipulate us. We need this to happen in English. We need this to happen in Spanish. Spanish language content moderation in the US and elsewhere is particularly under-resourced at Facebook. We saw reports about that a couple weeks ago out of Neiman Labs. And this is true, of course, in any other language outside of the English language. And so part of our job here is to lift up a multilingual effort to educate folks about what's happening and how our data is being used to manipulate us.
And like the perfect outcome right now, emergency efforts, what would be the perfect path forward? I mean, you get citizens involved, honest press involved. I mean, what would be ideal? The ideal, what kind of help do you need going forward right now?
Well, I can tell you that one thing that would make a huge difference to democracy is that the very companies who are undermining it pay taxes back into the public coffers that strengthen democratic institutions. And that includes K through 12 schools, universities, public libraries, all of the kinds of resources, journalism, public media. These are the kinds of democratic institutional counterweights that can stand up to a very narrow band of big tech companies led by Facebook, quite frankly, to undermine democracy. If you want a well-informed, thriving democracy, you actually have to have a well-informed, thriving citizenry or community of people who can be well educated on the issues. We cannot just leave it to internet companies to be somehow in the vanguard of educating the public. We need all of the other longer, more complex, more robust organizations to help educate the public. This is not just a Band-Aid kind of fix. And of course, the trillions of dollars that these companies mine off of the public at our demise, print money off the backs of our exploitation, and then never put a penny back into the coffers that would in fact strengthen and embolden and bolster our democracy is also part of the problem. So maybe we could have emergency regulators repatriate dollars and put them back into public coffers so that they can be used toward education.
Wow, thank you. It's great.
Kyle,
Great. Yep, go ahead, Shoshana.
Can I add one little comment here? Since we're talking to Lisi and other journalists right now, I think it's important to say that journalists have a tremendous role to play at this moment. This is not a time for formulations of false equivalence. This is a time to really lift the veil on what's going on. We've had great reports, even from Bloomberg to New York Times and everything in between. We've had great reports on the political deal making that Mark Zuckerberg has entered into with Trump and members of the Trump administration. We've had the last 2 nights of really stellar investigative reporting on Channel 4 News in the UK, unveiling exactly how the Trump administration, the Trump campaign used Facebook, weaponized Facebook, using all of the traditional methods and mechanisms of surveillance capitalism to suppress the Black vote in 2016, and now to stir up the white vote in 2020 with false reports about law and order. So this kind of highly dignified and focused reporting is absolutely essential at this moment. And I'm so proud of all the journalists who are here with us, and know that your role is front and center in this struggle.
Thanks very much, Shoshana. And with that, we're going to close. Thank you all for coming, and I will leave it all there, and you can expect more from us very soon.